There you go. I want to say welcome. For those that don't, I'm here if you're on. Okay. I'm Sally Lipsky from Plant-Based Pittsburgh, and welcome people online and new people here in the studio audience. Today's monthly meeting is on dehydrating foods, which is going to be fascinating because I have no idea how to do this. So I think that's why we're all here. I do want to say before we begin that if for some reason you haven't getting our newsletter, you can subscribe, go to plantbasedpittsburgh.com and check your junk mail. We were discussing that. And I also want to say is that we are having a summit, our second summit on healthy eating, and it's in person in Monroeville. And we're focusing on heart healthy living, which of course, if you're heart healthy living, you're also healthy for all kinds of chronic diseases. And we have a fantastic lineup of speakers and cooking demos. So it is, you can go on our website, it will give you the information, how to sign up. And it's a whole day of events, catered meals, and it's only a mere $40 until the end of February for Heart Healthy Month. So this is April 5th, Saturday. So with that note, I want to introduce Reverend Dr. Karen Webster, and she's done some fabulous cooking demos for us previously, so we're all excited to have her. And she is with Healthy Church, Healthy Seminarians, and so I am going to turn it over to Karen. If you are via Zoom, please feel free to put your questions or comments in the chat. Okay? So Karen, it is all yours.
All right. Excellent. Well, I am so glad to see everyone who is here, and thank you everyone who is joining us online today. Quick overview of what we're going to do today. First, I will give you a brief introduction, and then I'm going to go over some of the basics of dehydrating along with some tips and tricks that I've learned along the years. Then I will also pause throughout the conversation here that we're having today for questions, as well as provide time at the end. So I want it to be able to be an interactive conversation. And then also, for those of you who are here in person, I will have some samples that you can try afterwards. So that is a perk of being in person. Mm-hmm. And hopefully that, does that sound good with y'all? Mm-hmm. All right. So real quick, just a little bit about me. My plant-based journey started actually in 8th grade and started out with my concerns about my individual and environmental health. Then towards high school, I really started thinking about the implications of my food choices as it relates to our community, thinking about social justice things. Then when I was in college, started shifting a little bit more towards thinking about how my food choices was impacting not only my own well-being, but also my community being both people, planets, and the earth, as well as thinking about it of how, my loving God through my food choices. So it became more of a spiritual component of my thinking process. And so I've been on this journey for a long time, and some days I have 2 steps forwards when it comes to making healthy food choices, and other days 2 steps backward, which is, but hopefully the momentum is slowly going forward. And also it's really helpful too that I have my spouse who's also been in the plant-based journey the same amount of time as I have. So it's been fun to have that commonality. In terms of my vocational background, I'm certified as an exercise physiologist and also nutrition specialist and a whole person integrated eating specialist. So I'm not a registered dietitian, but I do work with one. And then I also am a health and wellness coach and also an ordained Presbyterian pastor. So we're different kinds of hats. And also, as Sally mentioned, I am the co-founder of Healthy Seminarians, Healthy Church. It is a nonprofit where we seek to bring about greater well-being among seminarians, clergy, community, faith members, and anybody who wants to be healthier through education, research, and advocacy. And so one of our organization's core values is that we do promote a whole food plant-based lifestyle. And so that is central, one of our components of our lives. And also, I'm really deeply excited to share my passion with you. And in terms of disclaimers, I have no commercial affiliations. And so any company, any product, anything I name, no affiliations whatsoever. And outside of work, I enjoy plant-based cooking and baking, organic gardening, and spending time outside, exercising, watching the birds, the pollinators, which I do miss right now, but I'm glad that they're not. And also just a lot more. So that's a little bit about me. So now the reason why we all have come here today is dehydrating, and it's kind of some of the basics. Just a quick raise of hands of people here, and then Travis or Sally can see how many people have done some dehydrating to some degree. Have you been doing it for years?
My oven.
Oven, okay.
My oven.
All right, I was just curious and wanted to kind of get a sense of how many people have been dehydrating. Okay. So first of all, what is dehydrating? Do you even know what is dehydrating?
Removing the water
Mhm.
from food,
Yep. So you're removing the water from the food, and what does that do?
preserving.
Yeah, so it's a matter of preserving. So it's a combination of, so when you have food, you're removing the water, and you're doing that through the process of both so you have the heat, and then you also have the fans that blow, and that helps to remove the water from the produce or product that you have. And so the thing is that dehydrating is one of the oldest methods of preserving food. And for many people, dehydrating food has become a really convenient way of preserving food. So again, it's a matter of temperature and humidity is required. Foods can be dehydrated by the sun, conventional oven. So some of you guys talked about conventional oven, an electric dehydrator. You can do herbs in the microwave, but that's about it. And then there's also air drying and solar drying. So for instance, herbs also, you can just take your herbs, flip them upside down, hang them up, and you got dehydrated herbs. That's one of my favorite ways of preserving herbs. But that's another, that can go over there. So one of the questions people have is, okay, so dehydrating, well, what's the benefits of dehydrating? Anybody, any benefits out there?
No food waste.
Yeah, one of the things that dehydrating is really great about is it helps to reduce food waste. So for instance, if you are growing food and you have a lot of food, that's one of the ways that you can preserve it for later. So one of the things that we grow in our garden is a bunch of raspberries. And so I love to give away raspberries, but even too, we end up having more raspberries sometimes than I can possibly get rid of at any given time. And so we'll dehydrate raspberries. And so then right now in the off season, we can use the dehydrated raspberries so that, again, they didn't go to waste. Yes.
It concentrates flavor.
It does. Mhm. Yeah, and actually, one of the things that I learned, because of course I'm always learning, I just love to experiment with different kinds of things, is that so we had some strawberries that I'd gotten, local organic strawberries, but they were just kind of tasteless. So they weren't bad, I mean, in terms of rotting or anything, but they're just kind of tasteless. And so at the time when I had them, I said, you know what? I'm gonna deal with these later. So I stuck them in the freezer. And then about 8 months later, I said, I wonder, one of the problems with this strawberry is that it just is too watery. So I said, I wonder what happens if I stick it in the dehydrator and remove the water. Is it going to be any better? Yes, much better. I was actually really surprised. So yeah, one of the things you can do is it helps to reduce food waste. Another thing too is it can help save money. So for instance, at certain times of year, if you are, the flow of gardening and farmers markets and the grocery stores, there's times when the produce is far, cheaper than other times of year. And so for instance, like one thing I think about is right in the springtime, a lot of times say like green onions will all of a sudden drop significantly in price. So that's a great time to go ahead if you have access to inexpensive green onions. I go ahead, chop those up, stick them in the dehydrator, and that's more than a bunch of green onions right there. And then they're great later to put in. You can put them in your soups, you can put them in salad dressings, dips. I love having dehydrated green onions on hand. So then another thing too is, as I just said here, this was I think this was actually 2 bunches of green onions. So you can also see that dehydrating can save space. And not only, I mean, like the actual space like that, but the other thing too is that if you dehydrate, it's not freezer space. So that's one of my problems is that we our freezer is gets kind of full, especially depending on what time of the gardening season it is. It gets kind of full. And so when I'm able to dehydrate and put it on the shelves, that's giving me a little bit more freezer space back. And the other thing too that I really like about having dehydrated products is that because you can keep them on the shelves, I mean, they're far less finicky than, I mean, in terms of having to keep them in the refrigerator and they can really, like, the ideal temperature is technically less than 60 degrees, because if they're less than 60 degrees and they can have a shelf life of more than a year. Although I can honestly tell you, we keep ours in our garage, and our garage is built into the hillside. And so it kind of keeps a steady temperature, actually about 60, more 70-ish in the summertime. But we had stuff last in there more than a year. Now, would I necessarily serve it to people? I'll serve it to myself if it's more than a year old, but I wouldn't necessarily serve it to other people. But I mean, that's the other thing too. It's kind of nice about dehydrated stuff is a lot of times it will let you know if you shouldn't eat it. Yeah, I mean, like there'll be some little fuzzies that you don't want to eat. So yeah, but yeah, so that's the other thing too, is that it's pretty shelf stable. And the other thing too is, like, if you had dehydrated products and if you put it somewhere where it froze, I mean, and they'll be all right. So, and then the other thing too that's really great about having dehydrated products is that they're great to have, say, as part of your emergency supplies. I mean, we should all have emergency supplies, and so you can have quite an assortment if your power goes out and don't have access to things. But also they're great to have if you're going to be traveling and you don't have access to refrigerator. I mean, when we travel, we love to just take a couple of bags of, say, oats and put in some dried fruit. And then we get to a place where there's some warm water, and voila, we got oatmeal and fruit for breakfast. So people also, of course, use it for camping and backpacking. So that's a way for people who are doing that kind of stuff to save money, because it's much cheaper to dehydrate it yourself than to go pay for the overpriced products that you can get at the camping stores. I guess the other thing too is that when it comes to dehydrating, sometimes people ask a little bit about, like, say, sun drying and all that kind of stuff. So there is the ability to sun dry some of your stuff. However, the technical answer for all of that is that you really need to be in a place where the temperature is over 85 degrees during the day with low humidity. So that means that people down in the Southwest you're good to go. However, if you're in places that have colder temperatures and higher humidity, the chances are your stuff will rot. So that's why it's also nice to have the electric dehydrator to help you with that. And then in terms of thinking about what are some of the downsides of dehydrating, is that, so because it does remove the water, that does mean that it is more calorically dense. So the thing is that 1 cup of apples has 60 calories. 1 cup of dehydrated apples has over 200 calories. So now most of us probably are not going to eat a cup of dried apples, but I mean, maybe. But I mean, so again, it is more calorically dense. And then the other thing too is because you've removed the water and it's more calorically dense, another thing about that too is it does have a higher sugar content. And so you particularly need to be mindful of that. It's still fruit, but it still has a higher sugar content. So if you're going to be eating dry fruit, a lot of times if you pair it up with protein, like in trail mix or in your oatmeal or something, that helps to mitigate some of the increases in blood sugar levels. So that's something to consider about eating dehydrated food. And the other thing too is just like other forms of preserving food, whether it's canning or pickling, there is a little bit of loss of vitamin C when you heat up the fruit. There's a little bit of loss of vitamin C and vitamin B's when you boil the vegetables, which is common before you dehydrate. So there's a little bit loss of nutrients. However, the loss of nutrients dehydrating is not as much as canning and pickling. And the other thing too is that generally with canning and pickling, you do have to usually, not always, there's usually going to be some added sugars and salts and stuff too. Whereas when you dehydrate, a lot of this stuff is just as is. So Just gonna pause for a second and see if there's any questions about that part that I've just shared with you thus far.
When you talk about canning and dehydrating, canning, you probably would use more energy
Oh,
to
okay.
boil and blah, 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 as compared to maybe.
So from what I've read, and that's a good question, thank you for asking that, is that dehydrating, and I don't know how the measurements were done, but they do say that dehydrating actually uses more energy than canning. Yeah, and because I think about it, some of this stuff here, even if you have a really efficient dehydrator, I mean, it's running for 16 hours. So, I mean, some of them are 8, it just depends on what you're doing. However, and the other thing too is, say for instance, a dehydrator is not as energy efficient as, say, you already got your freezer going anyway, and you're sticking your stuff in the freezer. I mean, that's more energy efficient than dehydrating. So if you have the freezer space, then sticking in the freezer would use less energy than dehydrating it. However, I can say that in terms of energy use, since our freezer is often very, very full, the amount of energy it takes from me trying to figure out how to rearrange and do the freezer shuffle, dehydrating is really a much better use of some of my own personal energy and not sharing that aggravation with my husband. So yeah, so it is actually, and if you do solar, of course, that's another way of reducing the energy usage. However, that's a topic for another day, and also someone who is much more qualified to speak about solar dehydrators than I am. Yeah.
You can save a little bit of energy by just using like the fan for the first part.
Mm.
And then turn the heat up, or or putting it in like a just on a normal screen and a normal fan, just to get it out, and then just use the heat and all the last part.
Yeah.
The last little bit of water.
Yes, you can, yeah, but you're talking about not using an electric, you're just talking about in general.
I'm talking about in combination. Like,
Because
so-
a lot of these ones don't, a lot of dehydrators, you can't control like turning the fan on and off.
yeah, I mean, if you just have like a normal screen and another fan somewhere else, you can.
Okay.
You can dehydrate it at first, get most of the way there with just a fan.
Okay,
And then put it in your dehydrator.
okay,
And save energy that way.
okay. So that's another suggestion. Yeah.
Are there fruits and vegetables that are not conducive to dehydrating?
Yes. So for instance, some of the things, but the general answer is you can pretty much dehydrate most, like most fruits and vegetables. However, say things like blueberries don't really work very well. I have not tried to like poking them and trying to get them to come down. That's one of them. In terms of some of the other ones, I actually should know better some of the ones that you cannot do.
Greens, you can.
You can
dehydrate.
dehydrate greens. So
I would think watermelon would be a problem.
Oh.
actually, you actually might get a really good product out of that. I haven't tried. So actually, that's a great question. And so if anybody else actually has a better answer to that, I just know that there are a few that aren't like
Yeah.
that are not, but since most are, that's why my list of like, I can only think of when I was thinking about, can you dehydrate this? Can you dehydrate this? And usually it's like, well, yes, you can. Yes, you can. But blueberries was one of the ones that are like, yeah, don't try.
Mhm.
So I wish I had a
Okay.
better answer for that. Because yeah, I mean, apples, bananas, citrus, cranberries, goji berries, peaches, persimmons, raspberries, strawberries, tomatoes, and then vegetables. I mean, everything from carrots, green onions, corn, kale, potatoes, pumpkin, zucchini. And then, yeah, all your different kind of herbs. You can also in your dehydrator, I brought a couple of things that you don't traditionally think of in a dehydrator. Is you can actually make cookies.
Mhm.
So these are almond cranberry cookies. And so for those of you who are here in person, and if you don't have a nut allergy, these are made with almond butter, dried cranberries that I made, and a little bit of coconut flakes. So it was made in the dehydrator.
Okay.
Another thing you can do, and I brought it, different recipe a couple times ago when Plant-Based Pitcher met. And these are corn chips that are literally made from corn, and these ones have corn, flaxseed, pinch of salt, and lime juice. And then another thing too you can do in your dehydrator is this one is tofu jerky. And so this one is made with Italian seasoning and balsamic vinegar. That's and a little bit of garlic. And then this, and for y'all here, you can try that. And then this one here is actually a spicy sriracha tofu jerky.
Mhm.
And that's also can be done in a dehydrator. You can also do mushroom jerkies. And then, one of the things I thought is fun is, you can also do things like, so this is pumpkin puree that's been, dehydrated, and you can actually have it in sheets, and you could actually fold it up, use it for a sand trap. Or you can use it as noodles in your lasagna. But and you are also, if you dry a little bit longer, you can actually blend this up into a powder. And then that way, if you have a recipe and you just need a little bit of pumpkin puree, or you want to sneak in a little bit of healthy hidden into a recipe, you can do that as well. And that takes up far less space than the pumpkin in the freezer. Yeah.
To what extent are you adding salt to any of these?
So
Jerky, for example.
So the jerky has that had tamari in it. So that had no salt. None of this stuff has any salt. There was, like I said, there was you don't have to put any salt. You don't have to put salt in any of it. It's not required at all. So I mean, I put in just a pinch of salt in the corn chips. Nothing else has any salt. Yeah.
I'm curious about drying cranberries, because the ones you buy have
Loaded.
so much sugar.
Yes, so that's actually one of the things I have here to show you is that you can do dried cranberries. And what you can do is get apple juice concentrate. And so what you do is you thaw the apple juice concentrate on your stovetop. Then you go ahead and put the cranberries in. And once they have stopped popping, then you go ahead and pull those out. And then you'll put I usually use parchment when I'm using to dehydrate stuff. And I put it on here, and then I just lay my cranberries on there and I dehydrate them. So then that way you can have dried cranberries without all that sugar, because yes, cranberries are loaded with sugar. And they're a little bit tartar than obviously the ones that are laden with sugar, but as you use them more, you get accustomed to the slightly more tartar flavor. So, because regular ones just become plainly sweet. Yeah.
So are they really terrible to just do plain?
Yes, you do. Like, so if you use the apple juice, it's gonna, otherwise they're really, really tart. And like pucker up your face tart.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, there's so many different things you can do with it. And the other thing too, going back to, we were talking about the conversation about energy, is because there are so many different things to do. One of the ways to reduce your energy usage, or be more efficient rather, is that I try to maximize. I have 6 shelves in mine, and I try to fully load my dehydrator when I'm doing it. And so the things is that fruits and vegetables, they dehydrate at a similar temperature. So they're around 130. Vegetables can go like 125 to 135, and or I think 115 to 135, and fruits are slightly higher, but 130 is kind of that sweet spot between the two. So I'll have different things going on at the same time. And then say, for instance, so if you're doing like a jerky, your jerky and your chips and crackers, they're at like 160. So fruits and vegetables and crackers don't work together. Or if you were doing herbs in your dehydrator, if you wanted to, they're only between about 95 and 105. So again, you wouldn't want those to be paired up with the other things. So if you stack up your dehydrator full and run it, because it's going to run at the same amount, whether you've got 1 rack in there or you got 6 racks or whatever, how many racks your dehydrator has. But one thing to keep in mind is that, so sweet and sweet, so like your fruits and vegetables, that is neat. Savory, like garlic and onions and sweet, that's not so neat. So you sometimes, I can't say I've tried too much, but yeah, you wouldn't want to have like your garlic and your strawberries go on at the same time. Yeah. So just remember, sweet and sweet's neat, sour, savory and sweet, not so neat. No. And then in terms of the actual like products, because a lot of times people ask which one, like, how do I even get a dehydrator? What do I do? So the thing is just like any product, the dehydrators can be as inexpensive as say $40 to several $100s. And I did bring my old Nesco. We were buddies for like 15, 20 years. I can't remember. I think it's 18 maybe. And Nesco died last summer. I was very sad. So Nesco and we were buddies, and I used Nesco all the time for that many years. And so the thing about ones like this is the fan runs from top to bottom, or sometimes the circular ones will go, yeah, this way, this one went this way. And honestly, this one I got at Bed Bath & Beyond for $55 like 18 years ago, and it did me just right. The only thing about, say, ones like this is that, I mean, there is like the little manual thing, and so, I mean, if you're someone who really wants precision, you're not gonna get precision. They don't have a timer going on it. And so I had a really high technique for remembering to check my things when they're dehydrating. I had a little orange Post-it. And in the morning when I get up, because I usually run the dehydrator at night, I put the little orange Post-it right next to my coffee pot. And I say, hey, I gotta go check it. Or if I was in the house walking around and doing stuff, I'd just keep my little orange Post-it with me, and it reminded me. Now you're probably sitting there thinking, hello, Karen, there is a phone. Why don't you use a phone to remind yourself? Because I was doing it before people had phones that they carried with them everywhere. And I just got accustomed to my little orange Post-it. So, however, so when Nesco died, I got this one. And this one has the 6 shelves, and they like that. And the fan goes from the back to the front. And this one also, it has a timer, and it does in the digital timer or digital temperature. So it's definitely, you can be more precise. And I can also honestly say that having the fan running from the back to the front definitely produces a much better product, because one of the other things you do have to do is when you have the ones that are like this, because it's running on top, you got to rotate your trays. So when you got this one, I've been experimenting to see, even though the fan is in the back, there doesn't seem to be a huge discrepancy between the doneness of the ones in the back versus the doneness in the front. And so I haven't had to do much pulling around, turning it back in. It seems to be fairly.
This is Kosori brand.
Yeah.
If you remember, years ago, we were talking about that as a good, like, blenders.
Right.
Yeah.
I have an air fryer that's the sort of.
Yeah, so
Kosori.
yeah, the Kosori is a part of like 3 other groups that have products. And like I said, when I was just looking out there, reviewed, this one was a moderate price, like nicer one than this, but not quite like the Rolls Royce of dehydrators. So if you're right now, I think it runs for about 160. I was able to get a couple promotional coupons. I got down to like 130. So I've had it since last summer, and so I can't speak to longevity other than it's still going. But Nesco over here, like I said, it was, I can't remember, 15 or 18 years.
And you still keep Nesco. even
So-
though you guys-
I knew I was doing the demo.
Okay.
Well, I had it seen there and I was gonna do something with it. And then at that point, once I started talking to you about the demo, I was like, I'm gonna just keep it now. But now if anybody still has a Nesco and needs any trays and you're here, if you want any extra trays, I'll give it to you. Otherwise, I think Nesco might go to the great beyond. Don't be sad. So that's a couple of things about the actual buying them, is that if in terms also, if you're thinking about buying them, is not just a matter of cost, but also think about the space and how much space is it going to take up. So I mean, for instance, like, little Nesco here is smaller than this one, and then there are some that are even bigger than this one. This one has 6 trays. Most of them run between 4 and 10 trays, so they can be even bigger. Now we keep our dehydrator down in our basement on top of our dryer, so space really isn't an issue. But if you're thinking you're going to be using it in your kitchen, or if you're in a space where you don't have a lot of space, you'll want to consider that. Another thing too is not only the actual space it's going to take up to dehydrate, but also think, how big do you really need? Because the thing is, for us, I thought 6 trays would be about right, because that's which is slightly more than what Nesco was here. And that's what I'd gotten used to using. So 6 trays for us is great. But if you're going to be doing mass amounts of dehydrating, like I said, you can get up to 10, and they're even bigger trays, or you can get them smaller. There's 4, because one of the things is we're talking about how dehydrating helps to reduce food waste. Well, you can get overzealous and dehydrate a whole bunch of stuff and not get around to eating it because you made so much stuff. So then it ends up being food waste. So, and also the other thing I can say too is, in terms of dehydrating, dehydrate stuff you're going to eat. I mean, because again, you don't want to dehydrate it, and then have it go to waste. So those are just a couple of things about the actual machines itself. Are there any questions about that? Yeah,
Does it heat up the room very much when it's running?
actually, no, it's not very much at all.
Holds it in?
Yeah, yeah. Now, the one thing though is that so the other day I was, running a couple of things and Travis, so my husband here, he said, must be the cookies right now. I said, uh-huh. So that's the thing is that so I mean so the heat isn't much, but you'll definitely, depending on where you put it, you'll smell some of it. So when we were living down in the south, a lot of times we actually put our dehydrator just outside, like we're in the garage or something, because again, depending on what it is, like orange peels, I mean, the whole house smells like orange peels, which is lovely, but I mean, sometimes you may not want your whole house to smell like what you're dehydrating.
With the spicy peppers, kind of be a little.
Yeah, I don't know, I have not tried doing spicy peppers in terms of, but I can imagine that could be a real eye irritant. I might go with the garage or outside with that one. Yeah. Other questions?
How much do you have to chop things up?
Okay, so the thing is that consistency and the thickness is really important. And then usually, I mean, you want to keep it at least, like say for like the tofu jerky and stuff like that, like a quarter of an inch or smaller. That kind of goes true for a lot of the stuff here too. And the reason you want to keep it also as much as you can in the consistency is that way it'll dry at about the same rate. So if you have ones that are thick and ones that are thin, you're going to have to, either the ones that are too thin are going to get really, really dry, or the ones that are thicker aren't going to get dry enough. So the thing though is if you end up dehydrating and when you lay it out, so say you're chopping up cucumbers, you chop them all up and you want to lay them on the tray so they're not overlapping each other in the ideal world. So that way there's space around it and all that to dehydrate. If you were to say 95% of your cucumbers were dehydrated and several weren't, and the ones that are soft, you can either immediately use or you could stick it in the freezer for later. Yeah.
Funny on David asking, how do you determine when an item is completely dry?
And I'll answer that question because that is a tricky question too. So that is so yeah, so as much as you can, being consistent with the chop size. But like I said, it not all is lost if some of it comes out a little bit soft. Either eat it or freeze it. That's usually what I say. And then in terms of, I'll answer that question real quick. So one of the things is that in terms of doneness, that's actually really it's kind of a tricky thing. You're learning through doing it is going to be one of the best ways you're going to learn for doneness. However, having said that, the common wisdom on it is if you're unsure if it's not done yet, over dry is better than under dry. So err on the side of over dry. So when in doubt, they say usually they continue for 15 minutes to 30 minutes longer, or sometimes even an hour longer. And then to check for doneness, what you do is after the product has come out, you let it cool for until it's no longer warm. I usually we dehydrate at night, and then in the morning time I'll pull it out. I let it just kind of rest for a few hours. Then what I'll do is say if I just did the raspberries, I'll stick it in a jar, put on the lid, and then what happens is I usually have enough space so I can see if there's any condensation that's starting to form. If there's any condensation that starts to form in your jar, that says to you, you either need to stick it back in here and start dehydrating it more, use it, or freeze it and use it later. So that's one of the great things about dehydrating is it will let you know, like, I'm not done yet. Another thing too, though, is that with in terms of how it feels. So a lot of times your vegetables, some of it, I mean, depending on some of the vegetables, they'll be crisp and you can break them in half. Or like a tofu jerky here, I mean, I can break that in half. Some of your more leathery vegetables, I mean, they'll fold like you see here. This is just an example. Like this one, I mean, it's pliable. If it wasn't done, it would be soft and mushy. And like I said, I could even made it even firmer and it would be crispy. So, but the key thing is really in terms of doneness, the conditioning is what they call it, is looking for moisture. And what they do say is the rule of thumb is they say you should really condition it for 10 to 14 days. I can say, I don't think I quite do 10 to 14 days for myself personally. It's usually 6 or 7 days, but what they do say usually is you put it in the jar. And then you look, and then but you also shake it, like each day I shake it. Because and see if there's any of them that brings up moisture. And so I just leave it around in my kitchen pantry, so I can check it each day. But if you're going by textbook rules, I do say 10 to 14 days. So hopefully that answered the question about doneness. And you can use them in, I prefer using them in the glass jars. And a lot of times what I do is, because I also do the canning as well, is after I'm done using the lid for the canning purposes, then I just repurpose it as the lid for my holding my dehydrated stuff. But you know, anything that's airtight is really what you need to do. And so these are the kinds of things right here. These are the ones I will save in the shelving in our garage. The soap over here that people are gonna be sampling today, these are like, this is not how I would be storing them. So although this is airtight, this one actually would work just fine. But this is not how I do it. It's not very airtight, because as soon as you allow air and moisture to come in, that is gonna introduce the chance of it spoiling. So airtight jars. And the other thing too is I tend to keep things usually not bigger than that size. Because like this right here, this is I think this is about 12 apples. So the thing is that if for some reason an apple were to like go bad, if you have bigger containers, then you could ruin far more. So a lot of times, I mean, I have a lot of these, so I put them in there. But a lot of times I actually prefer, as you can see, the smaller size, just in case something were to go bad, you're not ruining a whole bunch more. That's how I store them. And let me see. I'll get my couple of notes. Oh yeah, so a couple other things too is so I also, like I said, I like to use the parchment because especially if you're using like ones like this or even these though, this one does come with both a little like net you can put or a screen you can use, or you can. This one also came with the little, if you're doing fruit leather, it came with one of these. But I like the parchment because A, it's not plastic, and B, when I'm actually dehydrating, it is so much easier to get off the screens, because you'll read sometimes online, oh, you know, go ahead and just put some oil down. Well, first of all, I don't want to use oil. Second of all, that does not work. Your stuff just sticks to the screen and makes a mess. So the parchment paper, even that seems to work out. I'm gonna just leave it here. Works out fantastically. Then if you're some of the fruits, if you're going to dehydrate them, so for instance, say like your bananas and apples, usually you will want to have some lemon juice or your citric acid on hand. So usually a tablespoon of lemon juice to 1 cup of water. And so before you put your apples or your bananas onto your screens, you want to put them in that water to keep them from browning. So you'll also, if you're going to be dehydrate, have lemon juice on hand or citric acid. Yeah.
Somebody on Zoom is wondering about your experience dehydrating in a convection oven.
So you can do some with convection ovens, but I have not done much at all with it, because it depends on your convection oven and how low can it get. Because some, like for instance, some of them can't get very low. That's where it becomes a challenge. Like some of it, like for the fruits and vegetables, like I said, it really wants to be like 130. And so that it, most of the time ovens don't go much below 160. So some of the stuff, like I said, like the crackers and the chips and stuff, you could do in convection oven. But yeah, so you can do some things, but the dehydrators also have the, well, I guess the convection ovens will also have the fans. Yeah, so you can do some stuff on there. Yeah.
You said earlier that you dehydrated cucumbers.
Yeah.
Have you tried making pickles after that?
I did not try going from a dehydrated cucumber to a pickle. That'd be interesting though.
Okay.
Because actually I made cucumber chips.
Oh.
Yeah, so that actually worked out pretty well. But yeah, I have not tried doing that one.
And you kind of made them pickle taste.
Yes.
At least one round.
Yeah,
they
so-
had a pickle way about you.
Yes, they had a pickle way about them, but they were not pickles. They were pickle chips. Yeah. Let me see what else. And the other thing too is, so in terms of, actually I'm asking the other questions right now.
I have a question, like, when do you know when to do it? Say like you buy a bunch of bananas,
Mhm.
do you wait till they ripe or do you do them right away?
Okay, so that's a great question too. So one of the things I also want to make sure is, so when you're dehydrating, you really want produce that is not overripe or like bruised. So bananas, you don't want to get the 99-cent bargain bananas and dehydrate those. Those are much better for either making your banana breads or using in smoothies or using in a baked good later. So you want good produce because the bruises and the overripe, that increases the chance of spoilage. So yeah, so dehydrating, you want your better produce. And then your, like I said, the freezer can take the uglier stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
Vacuum packing, would you suggest like after you dehydrate them to put them in like a vacuum, have a canister?
You have the one
that
that's-
could do the-
You certainly can, but you don't have to. I mean, that would certainly if you vacuum packed it, then you were really significantly reducing the chances of having the air introduce it. So you could probably, if you've got the vacuum packing ability, they'll probably keep much more even the air.
Okay.
Yeah, but you gotta condition them, yeah. Yeah,
Can you name each thing that is up here? This-
Yep. Absolutely. So, I'm gonna go this direction is so apples right here. And what I love about apples is they're of course great in your granola and your mueslis. They can also, apples, sometimes people don't think about it. Apples, and I don't have peaches up here, orange peel, all those things are also, if you chop them up finely and, you can use them as a fruit tea. So I love doing orange peel with green tea. So apples, of course, too, there's them and they're trail mix, they're wonderful. These are persimmons, I just think they're really pretty. And so, persimmon cookies, and again, whole food plant-based cookies. And then these are, strawberries. And I love strawberries again, too. You can put them in your muffins, or your pancakes, or your oatmeal, trail mixes again. These are goji berries. And one of the reasons why I brought this out too is that if you have things that are coming in from your garden or you're buying them, a lot of stuff you can stick in the freezer. Wait till you have enough stuff. Again, going back to filling up your dehydrator. So for instance, I will have raspberries coming in at about the same time as goji berries. And what I do is I'll wash off the raspberries. Then I'll lay them on a tray, stick them in the freezer. Once they're frozen, I'll stick them in a bag and wait until I have enough for say 3 or 4 racks worth of raspberries. Then the goji berries, they're slow to come in up to a certain point. Then I wait until I have several trays worth. But again, I wash them. And the reason why I wash them before I put them in the freezer, because that's not usually what people do, is that way when they come out of the freezer to go to the dehydrator, they're good to go. And so then you can go from the freezer to the dehydrator really pretty effectively. So anyway, so those are goji berries and we'll use those in like our trail mix. You can use them in oatmeal. Yeah, these are the dried cranberries with apple juice. This right here is 12 bananas. And I did it in 2 different ways to show you. So the ones over here, they're pretty. But if you're going to be chopping them up and sticking them in things, I actually prefer them in the strips. And so the bananas, like usually basically I have a whole banana, I just cut it in half and just go 1, 2, 3. And so it's 4 pieces and 4 pieces. So this one, I find it easier to stick in things when it's this way, but like I said, this is prettier. And then these, like I said, these are the orange peels. So these are off of an organic orange tree, a friend of ours. And so what we do is we will steep green tea with just chop up some of the oranges in there. And that's part of ours. So we'll do oranges, we'll add either raspberry, goji berries, you can do all different kinds of fruit teas with your green tea, or you can do also with just the fruit without the green tea, but we like the health benefits of green tea. You can also, in addition to doing like the jerkies and the crackers and all that kind of stuff, you can also do roasted chickpeas. But obviously they're dehydrated. And what you do is you take either if they're fresh or if they're cooked, you go ahead and say soup broth. And you let them simmer in soup broth for about half an hour, let them cool down. Then you stick them on the trays, and then you got crispy chickpeas with no oil. And like I said, and if you use a no salt soup broth, there's also no salt. Or if you are not opposed to salt, you could do one like this one is a pinch of salt, and it was also actually boiled with vinegar, so it's like salt and vinegar chips. So this is salt and vinegar chickpeas. And then these were 3 different kinds of varieties of like medium-sized tomatoes from our garden. And I absolutely love dehydrating tomatoes. And that's one of my favorite things is because around here, you have a few months of when those tomatoes are coming in like gangbuster, and then you gotta wait a really long time. So when you've got them dehydrated, then you can chop them up and use them in your pasta dishes and, appetizers, all kinds of things. And this right here, I mean, this is that amount right there. I mean, that would be, several large containers worth. I mean, they really consolidate. So, and then these are pomegranates, because again, pomegranates have a very small life coming in. And when you can get them at the produce, when they're, usually I can find a couple week window where they're about 99 cents each, I'll go ahead and dehydrate some. And so then I can have them other times a year. And then these are the green onions. So that's what we have up there. And as you can see, you can do lots of kinds of different things. Yeah.
If you're baking
Mhm.
and you're using dehydrated fruit, many times it's a half a cup to a cup.
Yeah.
Do you have to make any adjustment with the moisture content?
Yes. Yeah. So the thing is that I am not recipes to me are just merely suggestions. So
I'm like that too.
so the thing is that, so if you are using the dried fruit, you can, if you want to, reconstitute them a little bit by putting them in water to bring up their moisture so if you're used to using fresh fruit and something, you can go ahead and just have them soak in some hot water for like a half hour, and that will help to bring up the moisture similar to using fresh. Or if you, like I said, if you use recipes as merely suggestions and you're not opposed to having to add a little bit more, you can, but it certainly does draw out some of the moisture from what you're baking with. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Mhm.
How do you decide, say like you have a recipe that calls for 6 chopped up green onions.
Mhm.
So you go to your dehydrated ones.
It's-
How do you judge?
It's called Google.
Okay. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, you Google it. So you say, how many, dried onions is 6 chopped, and that's how you get your answer.
It would have to be less.
Oh, it definitely is. Yeah. So if you're talking 6, I mean, it's gonna be less than a tablespoon probably. Yeah. So
And does it taste as good?
here's the thing, it depends on how you're applying it. So for instance, if I were using the dehydrated green onions, I wouldn't use that as my salad topper. Because I mean, you certainly can. But for instance, if it's gonna be in something where it's gonna be absorbing some of the flavor or the moisture from something else. So like you can put it in like your soup, your soups, or like, for instance, if you make another like cashew cream, Super Bowl party dip, that's a great place for it. So it depends on, like I said, the application of it. Yeah. Yes.
When you do your orange rind, how do you do that? Do you just have to peel it off very thinly?
So there's a couple of ways you can do it. So one of the easy ways to do it is you just take your peeler, you peel your orange, and that keeps the pith off. That's one way to do it. The other way though is that I will do some candying of some of my orange peels. And so I will, when I'm eating the orange, just carefully take off the orange, stick it into the freezer, wait until I have enough to do what I want to do, and then I will cut off some of the pith. So the easiest way is just using your peeler. And then just chopping it up into slices. So this version here was when I actually cut out the pith. Now, if you were wanting to just skip the whole thing and not worry about the pith, the white part, I mean, you can just chop it up. It's just that tends to be a little bit more bitter, to be honest. So that's why you want to take it off. But I mean, like, especially if you're putting it in tea, it's not a huge deal. Yeah. Other questions? Okay. A couple other things too is that in terms of recipes, a lot of times a great place to start is honestly with the cookbook that comes with your dehydrator. So for instance, like this one came with a really nice one, and so did my little friend Nesco over here. Although they've gotten a little bit more advanced since that. But for instance, I love it how they give you, say, like a cheat sheet. It'll let you know like some of your basic fruits and vegetables. And it'll let you know how to chop it, what temperature, and how long. So that, and then they also, in addition to just having the cheat sheet, which goes on for multiple pages, they also provide recipes. So everything from the jerkies to the different ways of doing dried fruit. So like I said, the cookies to they didn't have the chips in there. But I mean, so this is kind of a fun place to start. And then of course, too, the thing is that, I mean, the internet obviously has tons and tons of like recipes out there. However, one of the things is that anybody who's signed up here, I have a couple of links just for information about the basics of a dehydrating, and one of the websites has a couple of recipes. But if you're going to be doing the dehydrating for the purposes of actually keeping it in storage, then I try to stick to the basics of what either say like your cookbook thing is telling you, or what one of the food or one of the like extension offices for one of the universities suggests. So that way it keeps it, it's safe, because people out there, just like with dehydrating or canning practices, will have practices that you could get sick. So that's why, again, if you're going to be eating it immediately, like if you're making, corn chips for your Super Bowl party, if you find a recipe online and you're going to be eating immediately, that's fine. I just, again, if you're going to be storing it for a year, I wouldn't just use whatever blog or someone who looked cute put up there, and go ahead and stick it out there for a year. So just be mindful of your sources and what you're going to use. Yeah.
I noticed, I know also that with fruits and vegetables, it's different natural density of the product. For consistency, when you're dehydrating, is there a way to know, like, the apples are pretty dense, the persimmon looks pretty dense, but then the raspberries are really not? How do you decide, or is there a list of which ones go best with?
Oh, so there won't be a list of which ones go best with each other. However, if you look at the cheat sheet though, and you say, oh, this one and this one and this one all need about 12 hours. I'm gonna put
So
those
they
three
take
together.
that into consideration.
Yeah, so that's the
Yeah.
thing, is your cheat sheet really is a cheat sheet, so that you pair up time. So sweet and sweet, no savory and sweet, the time and the temperature.
Right.
And those three things, and then you can stack up. And so like, and you can, like, I would do carrots with my, again, 'cause that's sweet. You can do your carrots and your fruits, even though,
Right.
like, so you can do vegetables and fruits. Just be
Mhm.
mindful of.
But something like chickpeas would be more dense.
That would be more dense, and so that one, and that also is a higher temperature. That one would go more with like our turkeys.
Yeah.
Or like the cookies. Again, I only did cookies just because I thought y'all it was fun. Honestly, from an energy standpoint, doing it in either your like, if you're making a small batch, I use as y'all know, I use my little toaster oven to bake cookies. But again, if you had an extra rack in your dehydrator, you're doing sweet stuff, and you wanted to make the almond butter almond, it has a great like appealing flavor, so it's fun. But I would not normally use my dehydrator for making cookies. Yeah, so that was a great question. And then I'm trying to think. Yeah, so for the folks who are here, the samples that I will have will be the apples and the bananas, and I have the corn chips and the jerky. And if you want to taste a couple different flavored pumpkin leathers, those are some of the things that we'll be having. Let me see if there was anything else I wanted to.
I have a
touch on.
comment
Yes.
just from Phil online. He says, if you want to try dehydrated veggies and do not have the equipment, you can order them online from Harmony House. He has done that before on bike camping. Okay.
One place, like I said, there's lots of places. Yeah.
How important do you think it is to dehydrate whatever you're dehydrating all in one go? So it's like you want to do it overnight,
Mhm.
and then instead of doing it throughout the rest of the day, you finish it up the next night.
So what I've looked at the extension offices, they have not said anything in terms of that, like the exact window. So for instance, I know like in the canning world, if you can and the seal comes off, you really only have about 24 hours before you can go recant it, or otherwise you got to eat it or store it. In terms of the dehydration world, I have not come across anything that gives you like this is really definitive window. And so because the other thing too is like, because they say, well, like with the conditioning, they say, oh, well, if it's still a little bit of moisture left, then go ahead and stick it in a tray and stick it back in.
Right.
So there seems to be a little bit more like fuzzy room. So I do not have an exact answer.
Right. My
So-
electricity is kind of spotty.
Okay.
So I'd only be able to do it at a certain time.
Yeah. So I don't know of any definitive, this is the window, this is the only window you have.
Is that much noise?
No, it's a white noise, and let's see, yeah, look there. Yeah, it's just a kind of a quiet, so it's not loud at all. No. Good question. Other questions? Alrighty, well, I thank you all for.
Yeah, wow.
And, yeah, thank you, Peter. Thanks to sampling.
So everybody online or everyone in person too, I will send you tomorrow the recording and any information that Karen sends me, I'll add it to you. So people in person, that's if you have your own email, I'll send it to you. Okay,
Alrighty.
that was great.
I will
Great news.
go ahead
Okay.
and-
Thank you all online because
Yes,
we
thank
get
you
to
all online.
taste it here in
We'll
person.
taste it for you.
Yeah, we'll enjoy it.
Yeah. Enjoy it
Okay.
for ya.
Bye-bye.